Hello, I'm Ben, DivKid, and welcome to this video on Proteus, the first Eurorack module from Seaside Modular. Let's check out what's to come, which is lots of very musical pattern generation. This video is sponsored by Seaside Modular. Some of you may know Seaside Modular from their VCV rack modules and module makeovers, turning other firmware swappable modules into other things, such as turning the noise engineering Versio into a 303 acid voice. Well, here's the first Eurorack module, which is Proteus. And Proteus is a generative pattern maker that just oozes absolute musicality in a range of melodic, rhythmic and synth hook and bassline style scenarios. You simply patch in a gate to advance it forward in steps, and then take a gate and volt per octave output to your synth voice and you're off. But Proteus offers a wide range of controls to influence and direct the patterns. There's lots of CV inputs to influence what it does, you can save and recall very easily, and there's a unique patience control, which allows Proteus to get bored in its repeating sequences, be them static or varying ones, and then choose when and if it wants to generate a whole new pattern, which is seriously cool. Whether you're a seasoned composer dead certain you have to craft every single note yourself, or someone who wants to totally give up control of the melodic information to a module, there's lots of controllable variation in here, suiting for it being the main melodic element or a background supporting one in your patching. I like to think of Proteus as a bandmate that I can direct and control very easily, telling it when to change and how to change, letting it vary those patterns or lock them into repetition, to influence them with external voltages, and to save and remember the patterns for later recall. The Proteus manual is very good and is worth a read, but I just want to quote a section here as I really enjoyed reading it. So in the words of Seaside Modular, Introduction. What is this thing? The tension between predictability and surprise is central to the experience of music. Take any set of notes, repeat them, and that pattern becomes a thing, an object in the mind. And there's pleasure in repetition. However, if we repeat a pattern for too long, it becomes uninteresting, boring, and we start to crave change. Proteus is a tool that allows you to explore that balance between repetition and novelty in your music. Proteus starts by creating a sequence of notes using an algorithm that strives to make sequences that are more musical than random. It then repeats that melody over and over again. Each time it reaches the end of the sequence, there's some probability that it will decide to scrap the sequence and make a brand new one. The probability of a new sequence increases over time according to the patience function, but how quickly Proteus gets bored and changes is up to you. Proteus, in Greek mythology, was a sea god. More specifically, he represented the changing nature of the sea, the ever-mutating quality of liquid water. When facing enemies, Proteus would quickly take a new form to avoid capture. And so you can think of the melodic patterns you create with this model as Protean, that is able to change at a moment's notice, mutable and kaleidoscopic. So let's quickly go through the panel features. The first patch is a basic kind of getting started. So if you want to skip to the timing on screen and just prefer to hear me patch this, skip ahead. So going from top to bottom, we have a line of LEDs here that show various step positions and controls as we change the knobs. You can set your pattern's length up to 32 steps, play with density from one step all the way to all the notes being active, and you can add sleep, which is a number of resting steps before the pattern will repeat after each cycle, and there's the mentioned patience control to lock things in or let Proteus grow impatient and increase the chance of moving to a new pattern. You can press and choose when to generate a new pattern with that button in the middle, or you can do that with a trigger or gate at the new input. You can choose scales, and the first 8 are on the panel graphic there for major, minor, harmonic minor, major and minor pentatonics, Dorian, Mixolydian, Bhairavi, which is Phrygian, and then there's 8 more scales which are custom settings where you can create note weightings and custom note choices, choose scala files and work microtonally or with different intonations, or you can go chromatic or just output the note C to aid your oscillator's tuning. There's then an octave control, which increases the chance of an octave transposition up or down. Mutate, which will add a probability amount that one note will mutate and change per repetition. And there's the complex control to set the algorithmic complexity. You can lock the whole module on this switch. And with this white dot and silver dot, you can move to the secondary settings controls, where you can control things like gate time, sequence rotation, and slew time, slew notes, and slew on and off. With the pattern banks, you can press and save your sequences, recall other sequences and clear them, and with the next input here you can chain through your saved patterns as well. There's CV over all the knobs except for scale. You have an added transposing to mix in external voltages, and you can choose to quantize that or not. You have your gate input to advance Proteus per step. You don't have to clock it steadily, you can use random rhythms or Euclidean rhythms to drive this thing. You have a reset to bring it back to step 1, and you have your volt per octave and your gate outputs. So getting all of that out took some time. It's an incredibly controllable, musical and variable approach to pattern generation. So with that in mind, there's lots of no talking patches to show musical examples in different contexts without the talking, and they've got text on screen to explain what's happening. And those of course sit alongside the normal spoken demoed patches. The timing index is on screen and it's very detailed and all linked down below, so do use that to skip around and use this like a video manual. Enjoy the patterns and melodies, I certainly have, and let's dive in. So making music with Proteus can be incredibly simple, and while there's a lot of depth here, all of which we'll get into from basic to more advanced things, I just wanted to start showing how quickly you can have it making musical patterns. Now unpatching here, I have an envelope off screen controlled by the blue tracing cables, which will be the gate out, that controls the level of my sounds, which is tides here. Volt per octave is going to be the yellow cables and trace, again to tides, and there's some effects in the background. Now, just to quickly run through the controls, we'll go through these in more detail in a moment. The length, as you'd expect, sets the sequencer length. The density is how busy, how dense, how many active notes there are in a pattern. Sleep is an amount of notes that are rests, so you can have a pattern that's say 4 steps but then rests for 12 before it plays again, which is incredibly musical and not easy to implement on other sequencers. Patience wins the award for the best name on a sequencer or pattern generator that I've seen for a while. We'll leave that all the way up. I want it to be patient. I don't want it to change anything itself at the moment. And then scale. We can get into all this in detail, but let's just stick with a major scale, the first one. And Octave and Mutate will develop patterns over time. So you could even just start with all the knobs at 12, other than scale that I'm going to leave on major there. And that's kind of a nice place to begin. Now I'll take a clock into the gate input to advance through the steps. I'll take my volt per octave out and the gate out. Now if I drop the patience, it will start to create new patterns by itself. Now let's make it patient, let's not have it change anything. Octave and Mutate will develop a pattern, so we'll keep them down. And let's just have an 8-step sequence, no sleep, no rest, density up full. I'm playing with complexity and just making new patterns. As I bring up the length, let's set the density, turn some notes off. Now let's change the length a bit shorter and add some sleep. We can start adding octave shifts, which will go up and down from the root octave. Let's mutate, which is a probability of change within the pattern. The notes may change. And with a very musical, varying, resting sequence, very quickly, without any kind of confusion or advanced features. Gate in, patch the gate and volt per octave out, hit new, turn some knobs, and just make some sequences quickly. So let's get into the controls. We'll start with the basics first, the kind of front-facing controls we've just been playing with. And then we'll get into some more advanced stuff and some bits that I really love about it too. So here we'll look at length, density and sleep. Patience is all the way up, so it's not going to change and seed new sequences itself. There's no mutation, no variation and no octave shifts going on. Let's just seed a new sequence, medium complexity if you like. Green trace is my clock coming in. I'm resetting this every few bars against my drum beat, just to pull any odd time stuff we do back to the start of the bar. And turning up density, so starting with length all the way down here, this with red LEDs will go up to 8, and then with orange to 16, blue to 24, and green through to 32 steps. We'll stick to an 8-step pattern. And density, we'll take it from playing every note to just the first note. But interestingly, it's not random, it's not randomly skipping them. When you actually create a new pattern, either via triggering it or pressing it or letting patience create a new pattern, it kind of creates a series of rests, like a density map that you move between. So if we go to full density again, we will be able to go back to that rhythm we just had. It's incredibly musical. Now let's go back to just a 2-step length again. Density up full so they both play. Sleep will add a rest at the end of the sequence. So we could have a 2-step length and a 2-step sleep. You could have a 5-step length that rests for 3, making 8 in total. And you can do this with different densities, of course. And sleep-like length goes from red, orange, blue and green, going all the way up to 32 steps. So let's explore patience. And patience has to be the coolest name for a knob and a control. It's a probability of the whole pattern changing, much like if I press the new button. Or if I was to patch a trigger into new, that would perform the same function. Patience up full won't change the pattern at all, and then will variably, going counterclockwise, lose patience, with this going from blue to pink in the middle until it chooses to seed a new pattern. Let's go to 8 steps and just find something. That's quite nice. And then as we lose patience, we become impatient. And it's not on or off, like I'm going from all the way fully patient and not changing to as much impatience as we can have. It is variable here. And as I say, you'll see this change from blue to pink over time as it loses patience and wants to generate something entirely new. And patience has a CV input here, so you could be adding a voltage to the knob setting and keeping it locked in. You could be sequencing. Not when change would happen. If you wanted that, you'd trigger new or press new for a definite change at a definite moment. You could be sequencing the possibility, how patient it is, giving it a chance to change, but bear in mind it might not change. So shifting up the context here from pretty ambient modular type melodies, here we have this kind of UK house organ sound out of the Basslines Centrepiece. Drums are just backing what the Proteus is doing. This is through a bit of reverb and sidechain. And this just repeating for this style of music just works incredibly well. But here we'll look at Octave and Mutate and how these can vary your sequence without just generating a new one. Patience is up full, so it's not going to change itself. Now starting with Octave, if I turn this up, it's a chance of octave shifts happening. It can shift down an octave and up an octave from where it is, so you have a 3 octave spread with the default being in the middle. Now I'll turn this up all the way. And you can hear it starts to shift around. And it's a really simple musical device and one that's not often explored on many modular bits of gear, just simply to move a pattern up and down in octaves. And we can also use Mutate to vary the notes in the pattern. So if I fill this, I'm going to remove the drums and sidechain as well here. Let's go to just 4 steps. And you can hear this just repeating around. If I add some Mutate, and again this is variable, but I'll go all the way around. You can hear the notes are changing. As we go back to no mutation, we have a new pattern built on a variation, a chance of variation per note. So if we go to say 8 steps, and we add some mutation, can you hear notes changing? We can lock that in. play around with density, play with the octave shifting, sidechain it. So here we'll take a look at the complex control, which controls the complexity of the algorithm that's used to generate the melody. But let me quote this directly. The algorithm that creates melodies is not simply picking a series of random notes. Human-created melodies are not random. In fact, people have a very hard time creating sequences that resemble those created by true random processes. Real melodies tend to repeat notes. They tend to move in ascending or descending trains, and they tend to use certain notes of a scale more often than a purely random selection would. Proteus attempts to replicate these features of human melodies, but its algorithm is adjustable by the complexity parameter. So let's set this to just say a 16-step sequence, and with no change in patience, it's not going to change up full, no octave, no mutation. Let's seed a new sequence here that's very simple in its counterclockwise position. And it states that when the complex knob is in the counterclockwise position, new melodies will be very simple. Sometimes there'll only be one or two different notes, and use this setting if you want a more rhythmic melody or maybe a simple bass line. And if we seed a few sequences here, let's just come slightly up from noon. We can hear these simple melodies that would work great as bass lines. I really like it with this ring sound too. Now moving this up to noon, and this is variable all the way around, but at noon, it states that in the noon position, the melodies created are more complex and they tend to emphasize ascending or descending runs. So let's create a new sequence. And we can hear that scale-like motion. If you're in shorter lengths of sequence, you won't hear as much difference, but certainly when you go all the way out to 32 steps, the differences in these patterns is more obvious. Let's stick with 16 though, and then going all the way fully clockwise, it says that these melodies are the most complex, and it uses Proteus's full intelligence to create the most interesting melodies it can create, using a pre-curated balance of internal parameters. So let's speed up the clock here. I might go kind of double time, change the density so it's not just a constant clocked rhythm, and just explore these different complexities of pattern. So going simple here, densities carving out some of the notes. And then increasing. At noon. So a point here that I wanted to make was that low complexity patterns that Proteus generates are really good for the kind of non-melodic, say succulent, adjacent, ambient modular. As much as I love all those melodic things, and there's been lots of it in the video, it's really good at just making a riff or a bass line. Here's some drums, removing those. Here's Proteus controlling my oscillators and the gate out controlling an envelope for my filter. Now I'm in harmonic minor, just for a little bit of flavour. 16-step patterns, mid kind of density, no sleep, patience up full, so it's not going to choose to create a new rhythm itself. No octave, no mutation, fairly low complexity. And if we create a new pattern, it just spits out these kind of great bass lines. Now sidechaining that, bringing the beat in. Let's just keep going. Going high complexity. Still works with lower density. It maybe jumps around the intervals and the scale a bit too much. Those lower complexities focusing on less notes. So I just wanted to create this patch just to kind of put it in a different context, kind of hip-hop, ModBap here. It's more than just those succulent adjacent ambient melodies. I want to talk about how much I love the density control. But let me get this dual oscillator pad bed moving and we'll bring in the melody from Proteus. Now removing the density modulation, turning down kind of chordal pad. The red trace here is a stepped random sequence, so let's go down to I'm considering like a minimum density, minimum amount of notes, and this is then a positive random voltage into density. So we're now randomly shifting through how busy the pattern is. It just works so well. Bringing in So while Proteus is of course the focus of this whole video, it does make for a great kind of secondary sequencer. If I pull this part, I have a 7-step sequence here on the eloquencer. This is kind of my main thing that I wanted to sequence myself. It's tied with lots of random modulation and some effects. But I wanted to sequence Proteus slower, and it's just triggered once every 16 steps, so once every bar. We have this polymeter because we have 7 steps going against say 16. So this is just moving much slower than it has been. And fairly low complexity. When I created the new sequence here, it's set to the same minor scale that this sequencer is. The oscillators are tuned. So it's kind of like an auto bass line if you like. Here they are together. variation, no mutation or octave shifts, no rest with the sleep, patience is up full so it's repeating. And it's nice to just have it generate something that just works. So getting into some more advanced settings, and saying advanced settings, it's really not, it's really simple. But we have these silver settings here, which we flick the switch up. These knobs now control the things underneath in silver rather than white, dictated by the silver and white dot for the switch. And the first one here is gate length. This is a sound going into an ADSR. The blue trace is the gate output, as it has been throughout the whole video. So you'll see as I make this shorter, and we have to go through the setting to pick it up. We can have 10% really short gates, all the way to notes tying across. There's also a setting here, again in silver, when we're in the switch up, silver settings mode, to extend the gates when they come near a gap. So if I go to a pattern here that's a bit longer, say 8 steps, and we add some density, we go back to settings, and we turn this on, this will extend the gates that happen before a rest. And again, adjusting gate length. So you can get some rhythmic interest with different gate lengths here. So sticking with secondary functions here, I say advanced settings, but as I mentioned, they're not really complicated. Going to the settings here that are silver. These buttons, the second one in, will add slew to the sequence, so you can turn that on. They're just toggle buttons for slew on and off in this case, like that is the extended gate button. And then octave here becomes slew time, and mutate becomes the amount of slewed notes. So if I turn them both up, you can hear this whoop, whoop. You can hear this glide and slew between the notes. We could have a really long slew time, but not many notes. So you can get in there and customize how many notes in your generated pattern have slew applied to them, the slew time, for how bendy and long it takes to transition between the notes. And you can simply turn slew on and off as well. So here's another simple but secondary function, again going up to the silver panel controls on this switch. Above sleep we have rotate, and if we listen to this synth pattern against just this quarter note kick that's playing, rotate is as is in the middle, and you can see that the setting there is that red LED and we have to move to it to pick up that value. Now if I rotate to the right, we'll start to shift this step. Sometimes you can think of this as phasing, taking this a step kind of out of phase. You can go backwards from center as well. So that's where we started. So just going into the last of these secondary settings here, This button will preserve your melody, so if you load a saved melody, and we'll take a look at saving and loading in a moment, regardless of the knob positions, it will load as it was saved, and you'll have to turn the knobs through the setting that it was saved with and pick up that value rather than kind of have it destroyed in any way by turning knobs or moving to active kind of live knob positions, which is handy. And then we have a quantise button, which will change the transposition and the way the quantizing works at present. And there's no secondary function for scale, so regardless of switching here, this is always scale. This is only affecting when I create a new melody. Now if I turn this on, hopefully you can hear those note values change. And then finally, we have brightness as a secondary function for complex. And I'm not sure how well you'll see that with all the lights blaring on this for the video. But you can adjust the brightness of the LEDs, which is a really welcome feature. It's something people often don't gel with, too bright or too dull LEDs. So here we're looking at the transpose. Now removing the transpose and taking my bass layer, as in bass line, lower pitched line out of the sequence. Here's the Proteus sequence, which is this right hand oscillator, triangle wave into a low pass gate with some effects. Now the other part is another triangle oscillator, an octave lower, just playing a slower bass line. Now even without this playing any sequence, both lines together work well. And if I start to sequence the left hand oscillator with the bass line, that works well too. But if I want Proteus to actually follow the transposition of this kind of root bass sequence, we can patch that into the transpose input. Now I'm in the settings switch up here and we have the quantized settings, but when this is off, each step in Proteus's pattern is the step sequence plus the voltage present at the transpose at the time of that step being generated. You can just think of it as a raw sum, a raw mix of the transpose voltage and the quantized pattern. However, if we turn quantize on, pattern and the transpose voltage are summed before the quantizing to the scale. So you get a nice in-key transposition. There's just so much to explore. I want to go off down a big tangent on transposing sequences now, but we really don't have time. So if you happen to really like a sequence, you can actually save 4 of them here on Proteus. Now once a pattern has repeated, it auto-saves its state, and that will actually come on through power cycles, which is really handy in case you forget to save something you really like. But let's just go into the settings, enable the preserve melody, which will mean we have to go through a knob's position when it was saved, rather than it overtake when we load that pattern. And all we do with the switch down in the white position is press a button to save it. So I'll save that to slot 1. To clear it, you hold the button and that clears. And you can't save over without clearing, which is quite handy. So let's save this one. And then let's vary it. Let's say a denser pattern with some mutate, and let's save this to the next slot. Let's seed a whole new sequence or create a whole new sequence, pressing new, maybe less complex. Let's make this a full bar again, 16 steps. Save to third one. And let's see the new one. Maybe just a 3-step. With some variation, let's see if that comes through with the save here. Let's save that to 4. So we can recall any of these sequences now by just pressing the button. Remember, holding the button will clear it. Now if we take a gate signal into next, this will actually cycle through the sequences. So let's give that a go. And we should see this light up and blink when it moves to that sequence. So 1 just loaded. Two coming up. And when you get to the end, this will just cycle back to the start. It's handy to be able to save a few, and I really like that it will save itself once a pattern is repeated across power cycles, regardless of any pattern bank saving too. So as a final thing, there are some more advanced settings with a Proteus configurator that you can use online. Now this allows you to select some advanced options and define custom scales, and for each custom scale you can select a weighting. You can also select EDO, equal divisions of the octave, which is a traditional Western tempered scale, or you can go for just intonation. Alternatively, you can use scala files to get into microtonal scales, and there's lots of those online to go play with. The USB stick is hot swappable, so you could pull this out while using the module, configure something, drop the file on and bring it back in. There's also some advanced options, such as gate length pass-through, which directly passes in the gate in to gate out, so any change in gate length at the gate input will change at the gate output. By default, lock knobs on startup is turned on, and when this option is on, the knob position will not affect the melody when the module is started up. That's until they're returned through their saved positions. There's an option to reverse the lock switch, and you can select the base voltage for the sequence. By default it's 2 volts, you could change this to 1 or 3, and this is higher than 0 because we start with a sequence that can come down or up an octave and it doesn't go into negative voltages. Now looking at custom scales, per scale you can select that equal distribution or just intonation, whether you've selected the notes or whether it's a scala file, and you can select say a minor arpeggio, C, E flat and G, and then with the drop downs underneath, weight to certain notes. Maybe you want C to happen 8 more times than E flat or G for example. And you simply save that file, drop it on the USB stick and pop it back in the module. So you could be swapping this out regularly, though for me I don't think I'd be in and out of the configurator that often. If you've got this far in the video, drop a C sync in the comments. What do you think of Proteus? Seriously impressive, I reckon. Head to patreon.com/DivKid to support what I do. You'll find exclusive discounts, videos and more alongside the DivKid Discord community. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye!